solving problems together by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne. Right along here with Ransom Godwin every Thursday night, 10 p.m. to midnight, streaming off your Studio A. Thank you for everyone joining us tonight. It seems like the world of natural is starting to bend and morph to the noticeability of most of the planet. Now, if you were looking for signs or looking for the media to push fear, you would look at all of these events and line them up and see them one after another. I did want to talk about the coronal hole stream tonight, the way the media is pushing this 60 Earth-size coronal hole stream, but you can fit 1.2 million Earths in the sun. So in retrospect, it's just a headline grabber. Millions of fish washing up in northern Japan. We got the locusts sending across Mexico, just nibbling at crops. People are watching the skies darken. Record-breaking snowfalls in Moscow, biggest in 150 years. Record cold temperatures in Russia, 68 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit already this early in the year. And it just continues. So as we move into what is now going to be a currency reset / all these natural events / people feeling differently, the sun's for sure changing its frequency. How do we survive through these times is more the question of what we wanted to talk about tonight. I mean, we could go through, and I will go through, a bevy of stories from these record incredible floods across Africa. I mean, there are some things that are turning areas into inland seas. Well, that would be expected because the African mega lakes used to be full of water and they were larger than our Great Lakes. But as they diminished and evaporated, people would put villages closer and closer to the shorelines until we reached the minimums that we experienced in the 1980s. And now suddenly, the lakes are filling back up and flooding all the villages at the bottom of the lake. So we'll delve into a couple bits like this. Also, for all of you who signed up for the show notes, thank you. If you want to go to the show notes and get our recap for tonight's show, I just put the show notes out about an hour before this episode here from last week. You can go to oilseedcrops.org /MIAC show notes. It's up there in the browser tab. Click on that, put your email in. We'll get you a composite of the top 10 things we talked about this evening so you can wind those up and start conversations and also do some of your own research. So, Ransom, I'm glad you're with me because it does seem like there's a lot of natural things happening. And this coronal hole stream, when it moved around, boom, we had all these big earthquakes, a 7.9 in the Philippines and subsequent 6 almost 7.0 earthquakes. I mean, how many? There was a dozen over 6 earthquakes that same day that this thing lined up directly with the earth. So we can see the sun directly affects our planet. So what they talk about, the global warming and no effects of the sun on our earth, on jet streams or cloud cells. And, you know, it was so interesting because during COP28, as the coronal hole stream came in and rocked the planet with those earthquakes, the same day as COP28 was taking place, there's still bold-faced lying saying that the sun has no effect on our planet at all. Yeah, we got rocked with an enormous amount of quakes the same day the coronal hole stream faced our planet. But, you know, now it's obvious for those that are looking that, wait a second, something's not adding up. So, Ransom, I appreciate you joining me. And, yeah, man, shake and bake on the planet. Here we go.
Did you see that CME that just went off the backside of the sun today? Man, that was massive. That would have really crippled the Earth there, it looked like. I didn't see how big it was. I was trying to look for it here. You know, when it spun around the day after, I guess today, That big hole on my birthday, yeah, that was a giant. It was quite big, even in comparison to the total size of the sun. I mean, it was like I don't know, a tenth or something like that. I mean, it was like 1/3 of our view. I thought it was ironic. I shared it. There's all kinds of memes out, portraying that hole as some kind of shape. One of them was a duck. One of them was the "Don't tread on me" snake. Because it had that weird shape that they put out in the media there. Yeah, and it is weird that there was a bunch of people preaching to the choir for some years, and now the mainstream media seems to be jumping on board, trying to hijack every topic that's people have been kind of warning people about. The sun burping out some kind of CME that directly hits Earth when it's facing Earth has, in my opinion, been really sorely underplayed by not only governments, by media. There's been a few movies. There's that one with what's his name in it that's in every movie. I forgot his name. Nicholas Cage.
It's that one dude who's always there. Yeah,
numbers.
That's that one dude who you always know. It was called Noting. Noting.
Yeah, that's right. That was actually, kind of a weird idea there, at least the part where people were receiving messages, so to speak, directly every time there was a solar flare event or something like that. People on Earth had ideas. And, that's kind of like what people talk about when they just get a download looking out in the universe. If you did that from some random star in the night sky, why wouldn't you get it from our nearest star, the sun? You know what I'm saying? I mean, how many ideas are broadcast? It's kind of an idea that the ancient Egyptians, especially Akhenaten, had, that, kind of if you wanted to manifest something, you literally had to stargaze or look right into the sun. And the whole era there was when they moved over to a monotheistic idea. So that he was like a big revolutionary at the time, telling people there was only one God per se, and then that manifested kind of the last 2,000 years on Earth. So what a cycle to be in, where the mainstream even is starting to pay attention, because I think they know that there's a stronger than likely chance that in the time period in the cycle we're in right now, that we're going to have a major solar event, even within our lifetime as a bunch of older middle-aged people or whatever. I don't think it'll just be like Gen Z that sees it. I hope not, because they are lost. The older people than them that would be around would be the millennials. Wow, what a future to think about. But yeah, it's in my opinion been underplayed, and any bit of research into the infrastructure of the U.S. and other countries when it comes to how much or how not at all they prepared for an event from the sun to happen, you would realize that I think that what you call infrastructure to the elite, to the people that are controlling things, is a temporary setup, like like when you pitch a tent at a base camp before you actually build the house and build the real infrastructure. That's how they view the electric grid and the infrastructure that's currently around the world. And I think one of the major points of this reset is after they reduce the amount of people, they are going to promise the next generation some of the most extravagant human projects to build things. And I think this kind of falls into that line, because they're going to have to promise to the leftover people of the world, if this event happened, why they didn't do anything to prepare for it. And I think the answer to that is they did prepare for it, just not in the way that benefits the human beings living on the planet right now. They set it up to benefit, a small, segregated, hand-picked class of people that will be picked. We got dumbs all over the place. They have redundancy, continuity of government programs, I'm sure, that no one will ever even know about. And then there's some public ones that you can look into. And when you look into the public side of things, you realize it's really seemingly set up to fail. They did not do any redundancies really to back up the infrastructure as far as we have it now, like where there's a bunch of power lines, substations, transformers, etc. All that stuff's going to be toast and it'll be out. And I think it's really bizarre that a few years ago, I don't know much about it. Maybe I should research it more, but I know this much, that a group of armed men seemingly was practicing doing something that they had a lot of knowledge about. And the reason I say that is the places that they actually struck with gunfire crippled the power station there. So it was like a practice run or a dry run. And, I think there are some really nefarious plans out there as far as North America, South America, Europe, to bring them into a more destabilizing phase in their existence. And when you look down in South America right now and you look at Maduro, openly saying that he's going to invade the next country over, and everybody else is saying, whatever. I mean, who cares about that country? I mean, most people don't even know it exists. Right there on the map, it's Guyana, or I'm not sure how you pronounce it, right? How they pronounce it, but just think about that. There's tin pot type dictators right now that we saw it coming, that was going to happen, obviously, to Venezuela, the way that it went down and turned socialism and then turned into a hellhole, and now they're already trying to expand out to get resources that they've swindled with their obviously meant to fail government system there. And then it's weird that the people of Venezuela even put up with it. That guy's not, I think he's like actually a Colombian, like he's not even from their country. And it's really, really bizarre. So you have that going on. That's going to start things going on. Watch it. And you mark my words, you're going to see stuff in the news about other countries in South America starting to act about the upcoming emergency that's going on in northern South America. And then meanwhile, we have the thing going on in the Middle East, and then we have Europe that is ready to be set on fire, obviously. And you can see that the people of the individual countries are rethinking this idea of nationalism, and maybe they might revert back to the style of government that they wanted before. And if not, they're going to be handed a bunch more destabilization, which I think you can kind of see in the works for the U.S. too. If you watch the circus of a GOP debate last night, I thought it was really funny. So I'm not going to get into it too far, but I know you'll get my point. So they went through the whole thing. They debated. They took their regularly scheduled breaks for Rumble and, the other people that had it on the feed. I think it was Newsmax and some others. And everything was like clockwork, very professional. They had timed breaks where the debaters took a break and then they came back from their commercial break, and then they continued to debate, and you didn't miss a second all the way up until almost the end, when they asked a question about President Trump and warp speed, and then mysteriously it went and it made that weird, when you got a bad Skype connection sound, and they just cut it off and said, "We'll be back." And they had this really, really long 10-minute commercial break. And then they came back to the debate. And of course, they were on a totally different topic. I thought that was so ironic, considering some of the more recent headlines that are going around now.
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't discuss those here. Let me wind you back to the sun, the coronal hole stream, and the reason we titled tonight's episode, "Why is the media getting the whole world to look at the sun?" Well, it's going to be the blame and the linchpin and the pin from the grenade, for a better term, for the takedown of the internet and the collapse of the electrical grid system. Now, will these things be purposeful, or will they be amplified from the sun? This is the kind of thing I wanted to discuss a little bit. But let's step back in history first to get a gauge of why this coronal hole stream story is such a big one here. So I'm going to take you back 5,000 years BC, which is 7,000 years before present. Now, and Ransom, if you look on your Skype, I sent you some links into Wikipedia and also about the Chinese myths and legends here. It's called San Zhu Wu, and it's a crow. Now, the Chinese, 7,000 years ago, have this depiction of a black crow walking across the sun, and then their society radically changes, full collapse. So when you look at this bird on the sun, stylized the way they did, somewhere around 2,500 years ago, some of these Han Dynasty plates that were found, it looks like a coronal hole with actual streamers coming off of it. Those three legs of the crow would actually probably be plasma streamers coming off of the sun that would be visible. So the way I'm looking at it here, this crow, this dark patch, was at least a third of the front of the sun was a coronal hole. Now, we on this earth possibly could perceive that. They noticed it, they gave it a name, and after this crow marched across the sun, society collapsed. And I said, well, that's really interesting. Why don't I look at the GISP2 ice core data set for the temperature reconstruction of the last 10,000 years? And if you go to 5,000 years BC or 7,000 years before present, you see a drop-off of 2.5 degrees Celsius on the planet. That would have absolutely wrecked food production. The modern minimum, a drop of 2C, 25% of the world's population perished, and that was in the 1600s. Population migration, the things that upset, the change of the superpowers, the change of the currency of the superpowers at the time, of what was a world reserve currency, quote unquote, from the Dutch all the way into the English, that change and transition of the French. If you follow those, every time there's a change in a global world reserve currency, there is a reset based on solar activity, it looks like. It seems like the global reserve currencies also follow the grand solar minimum. But if you look back in time and you start to see this coronal hole stream and this stylized version of it from the Chinese, represented as a crow. And that's why I said when you saw that, don't tread on me, that coronal hole stream had some very different looking possible, but it wasn't nearly as large. It was probably, not 30% as big as the one of the crow that the Chinese had referenced wrecking their society. So then I said, all right, well, let me look back here. And what also happens at this time? An actual chapter of history called the Neolithic Decline between 5,000 and 6,000 years before present, starting at, ding, 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 7,000 years before present, or 5,000 BC. The Neolithic decline, a rapid collapse in populations, 3,000 to 4,000 BC. And what's happening that? And then they start to come back around, 5,400 BC. These settlements kind of rose back up, and then they were abandoned, the population declined, and then suddenly they tried to explain it from communicable diseases. Would that be something to do with galactic cosmic rays that changed DNA or allowed something to sweep through that it weakened the immune system of the entire planet, including plant, animal, and human life from dense cosmic rays? Because you look at these chapters of history matching up. Okay, a full bevy of information about the Neolithic decline overlaying with what the Chinese had seen on the sun is the beginning of that cycle time. So if you actually look at the GISP2 ice core data set, it takes about, from say 7,000 years to, a good 300 to 400 years for that drop to complete. So you're talking about wipeout of a 300-year period that just collapsed society. That was referenced as the beginning point again, and then stretched into the 6,000 years ago prior time. So what is this? I mean, how many chapters of history do we have to look at and start to overlay before we start to see something significant is occurring on the sun that occurs again? Catastrophes rock the planet, whether it be comets inbound sending trails of debris across the planet that have bacteria from outer solar system. Is it earth impacts? Is it the megaquakes? Because if we had these 7.0 plus earthquakes and a bunch of 6.0s rocking through the Pacific and different parts of the world because of that minimal coronal hole stream that was only 60 Earths big. And the way they tried to frame this thing too, and I keep pointing to it, they are pre-priming you. They are I forget what you even call that when they're trying to get you to get ready to see an event like they do in the movies, programming, pre-planned programming for your mind. They keep pointing us back to the sun. How many, and I'll ask everybody out there, prior to like the year 2020 or 2021, you never really saw that many articles about the sun, solar activity. Now, you know, these articles about the solar cycle ending early, 3 years early, 2 years early, whatever early. Now they're pointing you up to the coronal holes. Now they're talking about coronal mass ejections that could wipe out a Carrington event. Like, there is so much information outside the norm that it's piling up in predictive programming right now to get the Earth to continually look at the sun. Now, before, they would not have you look at the sun with a 10-foot pole. Don't look at it, don't, because then you could equate it with the global warming narrative and go, wait a second, sun's driving the climate, bro, not your SUV. But what I find so interesting is coming into COP28, where now they want to reduce meat consumption, and 13 nations have signed off to instantly cull most of their meat production, and the United States is one of them. So when you look at the reductions in the cattle herds right now, it's not because of disease and not because of this, that, or the other, the feed getting too expensive. It's because the U.S. signed on to reduce its agriculture. And we went through that list of 13 last week. Now, they didn't sign on to completely gut crop production as of yet, but they are signing up for nitrogen reductions in fertilizer inputs into the system. But the lowest hanging fruit is the cattle production. So you're going to start to see places like France, places like Brazil, the United States, they've all signed on to this to instantly cut some like 80% of cattle production out of these countries that have signed up to this due to methane emissions, et cetera. So here we sit in COP28, and the media across the planet keeps directing us to look at the sun on what a massive effect it has on the earthquakes, what a massive effect it has on, you know, possibilities to wreck our electric grid and do such damage to set us back to the Stone Age. But there's still that disconnect between the power of the sun electrically and what it does to storm systems in terms of electrical discharge, like massive lightning fronts, amplification of storms, in terms of convexity and how those thermals will build on themselves, amplifications of hurricanes, cyclones, typhoons, et cetera, due to that electric connection from the sun to our Earth. When you see massive amplification, you know, that's a direct Earth-Sun-Spire, Earth-Sun connection there along a magnetic field line. That electric is running down there. So you just can't see it in space. Although this last solar storm, this last CME that came by, you could actually see the stylized vision of when you look at Earth's magnetic field, you can see those lines wrapping around the planet. Well, you could actually see that in the sky with the red aurora wrapping down those, and just the most massive. They were bending on like the most perfect example of a stylized magnetic field line, but you could watch the red rope going up into the atmosphere on that curvature. So now there's all this information coming together that the sun is definitely amplifying, destroying whatever on the planet, but out of the other side of the mouth, they're still trying to feed you that the sun has zero effect on our planet, and it's only CO2 driving temperature changes. So there's a disconnect here. And then the chairman that was coming out in COP28 is like, there's no real science to show that CO2 proves. So I think they're in a shifting mechanism and mode right now. So one part of the world is going to take and try to still run with this. It's too much methane emissions, too much nitrogen, too much CO2. But the other half of the world is starting to break away. Like, we're coming into a split right now. And I don't know what the timing is, why. Obviously, we're going to get more solar activity and solar storms and auroras and different strangeness. But there's still that disconnect of sun driving climate. But it does seem like there's a break in the wall. The dam has a couple cracks in it. And I see that one dude with his fingers try to stop the dikes from, overwhelming the towns here. I think we're at this rollover juncture, Ransom. I just don't know. It seems like there's two conflicting messages, and it's confusing people enough to start to ask questions like things aren't adding up on the CO2 side of anything, because the entire world's media is pushing everybody to look at the sun in conjunction. I don't know if you're seeing the same thing, but it's very weird, the messaging going on right now.
Yeah, I actually have seen a lot of articles about the sun, and like when I do my shows, I don't really cover it. I kind of watch other people's what they think where we're at in the line of cycles. Hold on here. Sorry, I had
Yeah,
a
because
big
while
call.
you're saying that, if you want to take a look at the end of the Mycenaean Bronze Age, again, big, huge temperature drops. If you're looking, 535 AD, which you reference quite a bit, we can go back, which is like, 1,500 years prior, and you get that massive drop off of a good 1.5 degrees or more Celsius, probably almost 2 degrees in just, 30 years. It just drops off with all the volcanic activity and cooling temperatures. And, everywhere you look, drop off the Minoan warming period, say, 35 or 100 years ago before present, and it just drops straight off a cliff, 3 degrees Celsius. And then, you get that massive drop off 8,000 years ago where that was about the biggest drop off in temperatures outside the Younger Dryas era. And whoever had reformed society that, had lived through the cataclysm 12,000 years prior, they got the knees knocked out right around, 8,300 years or so prior to now. It just drops straight off, 2.5 to almost 3 degrees Celsius. That's an agricultural destroyer right there. So I don't know what you were looking for, some images or something. I'm going to send you another one. I got a real cool comet image here you might want to post up.
No, yeah, no, this was the image that everybody was talking about. And here's that picture you sent me with the crow on it. And now, I don't know how they were looking at the sun like this. Obviously, that's what somebody's going to say. Well, they couldn't have saw this from the Earth. Yet,
they were using mica schists.
Right. Or, they were looking at the sun with some really thick, what do you call it? Obsidian, like the Mayans were doing. They were just looking at it. I mean, I have several pieces. We just looked at the last eclipse with it. The whole family had like little one to look through. And the best ones were really the thickest ones because it cut out all the glare and you could actually look at the sun as a ball up there in space without the the super bright stuff on it. Plus, if someone did see this on the sun and for whatever reason they periodically looked at the sun, like in some kind of primitive science to keep track of stuff, or maybe it's just one guy and they look up and then all of a sudden the eye of Sauron's looking back at you from space, because that's what that looks like. This one that was on my birthday, ironically, there a couple of days ago on the 30th. And if you look at it, it looks like a, kind of a reptilian pupil, the classic reptilian eye that everyone talks about. Or, from someone else's point of view, it could totally look like this crow-looking thing on the sun. And obviously, it wouldn't have been the same spot. Matter of fact, this one right here, you could say kind of looks like a seal in a way, if you're just looking at the black spot. But how terrifying would that be if you keep track of the sun and you barely ever see these little sunspots on it go by because of the contrast? But then you see this one that's big enough to notice like this. So if you're looking at the sun, it would look pretty bizarre, I guess, if you had the right way to look at it.
Yeah, and I'm really thinking those three legs are a stylized version of actually plasma filaments jumping off of the sun. That would have been very noticeable. Now, the color of the plasma filaments that would have been tendriling off the sun, that's an unknown. But imagine if you could actually see tendrils whipping around off the sun up there, because they maybe came off the limbs of the sun so large and so outstretched they might have been, trying to reach out to Mercury, because that thing's basically a metal planet. So imagine if the tendrils of electricity were trying to rip off of that and reach out to Mercury, and you could see those things jumping around like one of those plasma globes, where the strobes and the filaments would be actually outside into the black space, where you could see them moving around, which would be something to behold too, because you have to try to realize they're trying to reference something that they saw in a third dimensionality and movement into a single image on a flat surface. So how would you do that?
Right. And not only that, I find it ironic, or not ironic. It seems like it would be on purpose. If there was a relative easy way to know when bad times were coming, that you might use that information against people, or, kind of like put options. in more recent terms, like all of the people that invested in put options, say like on 9/10, and then all of a sudden on 9/11 they got super amounts of money. This is kind of like that. If you have real records of long past human eras, and you have, the most brilliant minds working. I'm going to assume that because, why wouldn't you if you had the world's resources at your fingertips? You would have the smartest people that aren't really known working, or even the ones that are known working behind the scenes to give you an accurate depiction of the cycles, how they overlap, what happens afterwards, beforehand. And then you would do your betting, like put options. I know that, say, this particular solar cycle is going to create an extra amount of volcanic activity, possibly tsunamis, volcanic activity. And you could bet on things in the future after that, if you knew that that was, a reasonable thing. And the whole idea that, right now we're getting very close, even in the public, to predicting earthquakes. So if you shared this kind of information on a mass scale and the mass amounts of people understood the importance of it as far as humankind goes, there would be a lot more people paying attention. And then you would have the common folk getting good at the cycles and predicting things. And I think that's literally what's happening right now. And so they've wedged their bets against that. The public or the masses are not going to figure out the same things fast enough. And therefore they'll be, after the fact, crying about it or have loss or live in a completely different world. But they will have already gambled on all of these different scenarios. And I think that's what the, people don't understand. If the powers that be really want to pull the plug on it, they're smart enough to know how to do it in stages and steps so that they don't get stopped in their plans. And if they have the best resources of knowing things, like I would agree that probably, the Air Force and the Russian whatever space agency and people over there would know if an object was about to hit. Now, whether or not they would share it before someone in the public also discovered it, but it's less likely because obviously you need millions and sometimes billions of dollars to create the instruments to actually look out there. But we know that they have them. And I think that's why sometimes they delay information until they get a chance to look at it and make sure it's a nothing burger before they go ahead and release it. Because if you notice, a lot of people watch the sun, and then there are days that weird things happen and that there's a delay in the intel on it. So I think that they know what's going on. And it does seem like there's an uptick in the connection between Earth and the sun as far as creating natural disasters in a phase on Earth. And what you were talking about right there about the temperature. Now, imagine if that big spot that we were looking at there becomes a common occurrence. In other words, the sun is shutting down as far as overall light output, which you would have a bunch of these sunspots all over it, a dimmer sun. That would dramatically and almost instantaneously, as far as a year goes by, change the entire way the whole Earth works. And talk about driving climate change. That would totally change the climate in probably just 1 year if the solar output stopped, anywhere close to what it's been doing for thousands of years. Like, say it really reduced like 30% or just 10% of the light. There would be massive famines and complete environmental change in decades. And you wouldn't even recognize the old world. So what a perfect time, if you knew something like that might happen, to plan around that with your continuity of government and set the world ablaze, gather the actual resources, or at least the control of the resources, and then let everybody stay distracted with, false media, entertainment, and strife. Strife is one of the biggest distractions on this planet right now when it comes to hijacking human beings' time so that they can't create or produce anything positive. All around the world, people are going through hardcore strife. People are hungry, they're running, they're scared about what their governments are about to do, and they're just caught in the middle of it. And we have an opportunity in the Western world to see that that's what they're doing to us and put a stop to it.
Yeah, Three Little Birds was saying, hey, are these guys microdosing on their show tonight with the types of articles and ideas they're getting into? No, man, we're just plugged in. But if I wasn't going to microdose, I'd either do a half or something. I wouldn't micro unless I'm a daytime work kind of person. So maybe we can go into a little woo-woo then, because let's talk about LASCO C2 for a second. So, Ransom, I sent you that. If you go to the NASA feed there, it had all the different angstrom wavelengths of light where you could see the sun in blue and green, and you can see the magnetometer, and you can see the red, and you can see the GIFs that roll through on a certain amount of layerings on the images that they have. They stack them together so you can get like a 1 minute roll of the sun. Okay, so anytime that you see a sun diving comet, not a sun grazing comet, but a sun diving comet. Now, a sun diver is like a little rock from space that would normally swoop around the sun. Yeah, go to LASCO C2 and click on that one, and then see if there's any missing frames inside there. Because when you come into a rock hitting the sun, you're going to get a CME every single time. Now, a sun diving comet, you'll watch the little ones will jump in, and as soon as you see that, boom, there's always a CME, but there's always missing time frames out of that too. Like the slides for those particular screen grabs of that timestamp will be missing, and there'll be a gap in time. So if a small sun grazer, yeah, that's the right one there, Ransom. If you get a small sun diving comet and it creates a CME, can you imagine if we had rods from God and we understood these coronal hole streams and we understood when a sun diving comet was coming in, and you knew the precise date and time that would hit onto the sun? And if you had something like those tungsten rods, the rods from God, and you threw those into the sun at the exact same time as that sun diving comet was coming in there, you could get a much larger release of particulates off of the sun. That proton density would be off the charts. So again, it would be a natural event happening. And that blue one down there too with LASCO, that's the stereo ahead also, where you're looking at the backside of the sun on the blue one. Yeah, LASCO C3, that's further out view, and you're looking at the backside, so it's a different view on the sun there. And you'll see you'll see there's a nice halo. That's a discharge. If that was coming at the Earth, we would definitely lose power. But imagine riding on top of these natural cycles. Like, you understand a sun diver hits a CME all the time. And this is the crazy thing where they always remove those frames, so you can't put something together that a small rock will discharge from the sun because it's electrically connected. It's as if all of the differential in charge, when those two bodies meet, it's like an exploding capacitor goes off, and the discharge, and something that small should not send a billion tons of plasma ripping off the face of the sun of something that's 2 acres wide. It just makes no sense unless it's electric. Now, if you understood that, and you have, these tungsten rods, the term from them, they're floating in space, rods from God, but they get enough, gravity into them, and the actual velocity of a tungsten rod hitting the ground would mimic something like a 2,000-pound bomb, Moab, or some sort of small nuclear device. So if you could ride on top of the natural cycle and you understood a sun diving comet was coming in at a certain angle and a certain part of the face of the sun that would release directly to the Earth, you could amplify that by shooting those tungsten rods in there to make them arrive within the same seconds that the sun diving comet would penetrate. And you could make it move around. So it could be north at the 12 o'clock position, south, several hundred miles or several thousand miles either side of where the sun diving comet was going in. You could layer around there like the dials of a clock and send 12 of those rods from God, tungsten rods, in at the same time the sun diver would hit, and that would send out something so massive it would be a Carrington type event release. But when you would look back at it, like in LASCO C2, it would only look like there was a sun diving comet going in there, and that would be absolutely hidden from public view. Now, when would that be pulled off? Well, when they want to take the grid down. All culpability is off. There's no fingers to point to. It was a sun diving comet that set off that solar flare, that CME, that ripped through and then took down our power grid. But I am absolutely saying that what we are seeing on our Earth at the moment is technologies amplifying the natural effects. So whether it be with geoengineering and ionospheric heaters bending in at the same time coronal hole streams are swinging around to try to vibrate and get these, these Tesla vibrations to set off earthquakes. Adversaries seem to have a lot of floods right now, of all-time record floods and all-time record snows. It's paralyzing for these nations how big these events are so far out of the norm, whether it be cold and snowstorms and floods and earthquakes. There's something that's way off the Richter here. And I'm thinking there's a lot more control with our technologies, not causing them by any way, shape, or form. Riding on top of, amplifying the effects out. But I'm starting to take it off planet now because the whole sun diving comet thing, if you had the idea, if you had orbiting satellites that could match the velocity and the known speed that the hit would be, imagine if you could control solar flares or CMEs coming off of the sun now. If that is as good as our technology would be to ride on top of, not to create, to amplify and ride on top of as a disguise. I really think our technologies are that good right now with satellites. If you believe that we could penetrate the ether in the dome, in the firmament, that if our satellites could get out there, like obviously we can penetrate the firmament, or else we wouldn't be out there with satellites in geostationary orbit between the Earth and the sun, giving us these images of what we see, like stereo ahead and stereo behind. Stereo ahead's looking at the back of the sun, looking from the back of the sun in stationary orbit, from the back of the sun toward the Earth, and that's stereo ahead because it's ahead of us of what we can see of sunspots moving around into the front of the disk. So think about how, if they can do this type of technologies, what are they able to do with weather systems on the planet? And I'll say one last thing. The amount of extra moisture in the atmosphere from the Hunga Tonga eruption, it's heavier, denser, and is absolutely disrupting the regular flows of hydro around our planet. The hydrological cycle is slowing down and dropping out faster. Because think about fog, like driving through a foggy night or walking through fog compared to a crystal clear night like we've had here, 30 degrees, crystal clear skies. Like the density of the air is very different. So if you're adding a lot more moisture up in, things are going to slow down. They're going to bog down on themselves. These cloud cells, the way the jet streams are moving in, you're going to get pockets that haven't moved, and the atmosphere is going to need to bend around that heavier moisture-laden pocket that's sort of locked in place like a fog bank. But think of it, scale it up to jet stream size or cloud cell size. This is why we're seeing a lot of mix-ups too. Now, if you knew where these clog-up areas are, where two cloud cells are bending in on themselves because of the new moisture pattern setup, and it's creating a blockage there because it's so moist and dense and it's not moving as fast. If we could use an ionospheric heater and bend that and then amplify that system. That's what I'm saying. I really believe that a lot of these technologies are not creating, but amplifying the natural effects of whatever it is, from the sun to the earth to the atmosphere. And then you have to add in the electrical inside that, the electromagnetism. Anyway, man, I went on a little ramble there, so I'll let you get back to it.
I think essentially what you're saying is exactly in a way going on. All of the technology and trends, fads, social engineering, etc., is designed to manipulate and block the natural surroundings. And I wanted to point out some of these articles that shows kind of the mentality of older people versus younger people But not only that, the false message that the establishment, meaning the mainstream media and others, are pushing, and why you shouldn't listen to them. So here's one: why millennials say they need $525,000 a year to be happy. Now, I'm not going to argue. I'd probably be happy if I got that too, but I've never got anywhere near that, and I've been happy most of my life. So aside from that, I keep reading articles like this that just maybe there is something to it, but the way that they present it gives a false narrative of an idea. So here's an article
Ransom,
from.
let me dive in there. Like those expectations, none of them have ever achieved that level of wealth. So how would they even know what the expectation of having that much money, what you could do with it in the year? Like that makes no sense to me. They've never even touched remotely close to that in a year's earnings. Like somebody that's 20 years old earning $500,000 a year. Like that's, there are people who have done it. Usually it's generational wealth or some kind of, they hit something on crypto or they had some kind of invention or started an online business. Okay. That's like 1/1000th of 1% of people. The other 99 point whatever percent have never, even in their wildest dreams, come close to that at 20 or 22 or whatever years old of making $500,000 a year. So, that article, I would love for you to explain to me how they think that would make them more happy than $1 million or 200,000 or whatever the number they might choose.
Right. It's kind of seems like a weird number that they just picked, but I think it's based on mostly looking and seeing media that kind of promotes this idea that you have to do certain things to be considered a success, which are unreal and fabricated ideas, but they're meant to throw people in the meat grinder to keep trying it. Yeah, and it is funny, and I've seen a lot of videos where women say that any man that they hook up with needs to, make $500,000 or yada yada, which is unreasonable expectations, and that's clearly why they're never going to be happy if that's what they think they need to be happy. But it's kind of like it's a thing to put out there just as a bait and switch kind of idea to really ruin expectations of people to work hard, save, and do other things that are more healthy in a lifestyle than expect that, you're just going to be worth this much just because you're alive. And it goes on. And this is what I wanted to do, is expand this idea of the way the media and stuff portray ideas. So here's another headline: exercise may not be the key to living longer. It might even be aging you faster. Now, that's true. I think maybe, like if you overworked yourself and you don't maintain the proper nutrients and you overdo it, that's true. But the way that they present it, you could see there's probably millions of people today that clicked on this article and thought, you know what, I didn't even want to go to the gym today anyway. Right. And here's another one, which I thought was really cool because I believe these people on what they're saying. And there's some key things that go into this. So this is a Study Finds article. Never argue, always love: the enduring secrets of Britain's oldest married couple. And then when you get down here, it says, we had no idea we'd last so long, 103, 102. And they accredit that to communication and time outdoors. So keep that in mind, the outdoors part especially. And then it gets down here where it talks about what the guy did when, after he got back from the war. And they moved here and they lived on a fruit farm, and they're crediting their life to outdoor living and their longevity. So let's move over to this article from The Guardian. It says cells of people living in greener areas age more slowly, research finds. I didn't actually read this because I've actually read lots of articles that come to the same conclusion. However, there's a little difference in this new age article. So cells of people living in greener areas age more slowly, research finds, but effects of environmental racism can erase any benefit. That's right. Because, just this idea, and it's weird how they always throw these trigger words together. So environmental racism.
Yeah. What does that mean? I've never even heard that term before.
It basically means that only people that live around nature or can afford a nicer house and yard and a hacienda, get an opportunity to have trees and yada yada. Now, the reason that people kind of think that in LA and areas is because cities have, mandated to get rid of all kinds of trees and stuff in certain areas, and they have made it that way. Another reason's because, golf courses have trees and they have nature. So therefore, poor people can't go there, which makes it racist. So it's a really silly idea. It seems like really all they wanted to do is add the words environmentalism and racism in a phrase together. So it's got the double effect, right? But that's obviously silly. But the study doesn't really get into that. Actually, I can tell you that because I've read several of these studies. It has nothing to do with environmental racism. And the point is that if you're a person that goes outside and you garden and you grow stuff, or you live in a rural area and you have trees around you and you spend a lot of time outside, that literally the cells in your body slow down and age slower. Now, I believe part of this is the way and the reason that we fit in our natural environment. As a human being, we could be living out in the environment and doing, not to get biblical, but even in the Bible, it talks about, I gave you all these seed-bearing plants to use, and, I give you domain over the animals, and I want you to spread out and cultivate. Now, it didn't say spread out and dominate. It didn't say spread out and, wage war or have empire or destroy or none of these other terms. It was cultivate. And we all know cultivating is something that only some people do. That would be cultivating plants, raising animals, animal husbandry, ranching, milk and dairy people. They cultivate. Beekeepers, all of these people that keep us fed. And in the ancient world, these were almost the magicians out there, the seed keepers, the beekeepers, and all of these other things that have developed into a massive industrial movement to feed millions of people, which ironically has moved those people out of their place in the natural environment. So they're no longer there. They're busy with these ideas of fakeness and distraction and worry and technology. And they think the answer is going to be found in a little 2.5-inch screen in their lap that they carry with them everywhere. Instead, the trick is here. You won't let me track you. If I just told you, hey, let me track you. I want to know where you go. I want to know everything you do. I want to read your text messages. I want to know what you're saying to your friends. I want to know when and if you buy something, how you like it, how you don't like it. I want to know what you talk about with your friends. I want to know what kind of medicines you're taking. If someone told somebody that, they would be like, hey, creep, back off. But if you sell it to them as an idea of something that they need and they want, and you lie to them constantly about how life is a competition to have stuff that doesn't matter, then you realize why millennials think that they need $500,000 a year to be happy. And this old 102-year-old couple are talking about because they sat around and enjoyed each other's company, and they took it easy and they appreciated life. And, it makes sense that a vet from World War II would see the beauty in the opposite of what the establishment, empire, and world powers want. Because everybody that lived or participated in any war around the world has felt the effects of a plan that they probably didn't come up with. And any vet from the U.S., they waited to a particular time where these people with these fundamental ideas and, history are all dead. They're all dead now. These are the last of these people we're even talking about on here, where it talks about, you might want to listen to them, about never arguing, always loving each other, and spending a lot of time cultivating and being outdoors. It just, they're the science experiment that they're talking about in this study about cells, but they're the living example of it that you can look at. And that's the idea that they want to steal from everyone and keep them distracted until the whole thing kind of burns down. And that way, they and their descendants, only them, the technocratic elites and the so-called rulers of the planet, will get to enjoy that world where the human being actually fits into their environment. And think about that. If you were living outside, according to my studies about health and everything, if you kept basic hygiene, but you live outside, and you eat what's from outside, meaning the plants and fruits and vegetables that you grow, and you eat the meat that's from the continent that you live in, the meat, whatever it is that you can get your hands on. And if those animals also were taken care of and cultivated, and you gave them the same kind of life that you're trying to live, with clean food, stress-free environment, no worries, no strife, no drama, then that animal would produce great food for you, and you would live just like this elderly couple, where you would live a long time because there wasn't stress hormones like cortisol and stuff being produced from constant bombardment of negativity and fear and hate and the idea that they're taking things from you. Not that it's not true. They also like that idea that they do these things to the public and help with the overall demoralization of people and demoralize them. And, I always thought that was funny that demoralizing and morality go hand in hand there. And if you can push the ideas of immorality, then you have an immoral and demoralized people.
Beatles talked about love, 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 and once they got too deep and too many people followed on the track of love, they were taken out to demoralize the society. Imagine the loss of the Beatles in the 60s when they were the biggest thing, bringing the world together in love.
During times of both prosperity and disparity, through the rise and fall of great dynasties and civilizations, gold has maintained its purchasing power as a reliable store of value for millennia. Gold has been used as money since 560 BC, when King Croesus of Lydia created a gold coin in his own image. Ever since, it has continued to increase its long-term value and remains the world's most universally accepted form of money. Today, the demand for gold continues to flourish globally. History proves that fiat paper money is designed to go to zero through inflation, whereas gold has intrinsic value in which it maintains forever. Paper money is a debt instrument. Gold is an asset of wealth in its own right. It does not depend upon any governments, corporations, or individuals' promise to repay. ITM Trading has spent the last 27 plus years developing a team of expert researchers and analysts to make this possible. Simply put, we build strategies which are historically proven to protect your wealth and assets through any economic downturn or currency collapse. Schedule your free gold and silver strategy call 866-834-1422. That's 866-834-1422. Or go to learn.itmtrading.com/MIAC and keep watching Mountain High Time and Mini Ice Age Conversations if you know what's good for you.
Norman Rockwell's Freedom from Want painting depicts one of the most peaceful scenes in American life as a family gathers around a holiday dinner table to give thanks, eat, talk, laugh, and share in an abundance of blessings. While this great American tradition will play out in the coming weeks, a hunger catastrophe is unfolding around the world, putting even the simplest of meals out of reach for a growing number of individuals and families around the world. Right now, nearly 1/3 of the world is food insecure, with over 828 million people going to bed hungry each night. 149 million children experience stunted growth and development due to a chronic lack of essential nutrients. As many as 50 million people in 45 countries are at immediate risk of famine, and more than 45 million children suffer from acute malnutrition or wasting, a devastating condition where a child's body is so starved of nutrients it begins to consume itself. These numbers are staggering, and behind every one of them is a real person. More than 44 million people in the U.S. face hunger, including 1 in 5 children. Millions of people in the U.S. don't have enough food to eat or don't have access to healthy food. This is a big problem, but together we can solve it. Although it isn't always obvious who is going without food or facing food insecurity, it might be your friend, your grandparents, or a coworker who is struggling to put food on the table. It could be a neighbor, the friendly elderly couple down the street. Maybe it's a single dad or mom who might need help. We all have tough times, That's why investing in emergency food storage is a must for you and your family's long-term safety net, but it can also be a life-saving gift. So in this giving season, you could help others by providing a helping hand to those in need of a little extra to make it through. As we always say, those who know what's coming are using today to prepare. American families are preparing. Folks are investing in emergency food storage. And you should be too, and you can start today with ADAPT 2030. Right now you can save $200 on a 3-month emergency food supply for yourself, or even better, for someone in need. Make this holiday season truly a happy one. My Patriot Supply, the country's largest preparedness company, is more than equipped to stock your shelves. Their best-selling 3-month emergency food kit provides delicious breakfasts, lunches, and dinners that last up to 25 years in storage. That's 25 years of security. Just think about that. Almost nothing out there other than gold and guns that will maintain not only value but usefulness and security. And right now, it's $200 off. Get over 2,000 calories every day. Just add water and heat, then eat. Make sure every member of your family has a 3-month food kit from My Patriot Supply.
Production costs, etc. Every little bit helps, so we can keep the information flowing. That might be useful for us during this transition. And the reason I say that, I had this interview with Penny Kelly and Patty Greer, and they were talking about crop circles, and had done an enormous amount of research, because Penny Kelly spent something like 16 years with Dr. Levengood. He was a biophysicist, and what they do is they got the energetic readings after they would go into these areas that had, the anomalies of the twisted and upraised plants. Yeah, some of them were fake, obviously, but most of them were real. And the one thing that, after all of those years of research, was about how do you pass seeds through an aluminum electromagnetic plate to then increase yields after you plant the seeds. Because they found routinely on the control seeds, compared to the electrified seeds or passing through an electromagnetic field, the root length was far deeper. The girth of the plant in terms of cellular structure of green matter was far larger, and the yields from the target species fruit or vegetable also was enhanced. Now, Ransom, you talked once before about electrocharging and corn coming back to some of its original state that had something like, 16 ears of corn on a single plant, I think you said. But tapping in with Patty Greer and, Penny Kelly talking about this with neodymium magnets, and it really set me off. But, the whole thing that we got into was, how would that disrupt the chemical industry in terms of glyphosate, pests, fertilizers, and the billions and hundreds of billions of dollars of non-sold chemicals? And this is where it got into a little bit of that, disrupting an industry of something so simple, free. It doesn't cost much to electrify a bag of seeds. You put it through 2 plates and run a current through the plates for about 30 seconds or even 1 minute, and suddenly you have seeds that will just surpass anything on even the highest GMO yields, but bringing you back to heirloom species where it doesn't require all the inputs. You're talking about disruption on electrogravitics or electric motors powered by the Earth's magnetic field. Everywhere you look, there's disruption. And anytime those are talked about, or the reason I'm getting into that article you were talking about, focusing on love between peoples, that's a disruptive thing. That's a disruptor for the war. It's a disruptor for the police. There's not as many fines to collect. It's a disruptive technology. Your emotion of focusing on the higher vibration is disruptive to the lower vibrational pattern. So anyway, I thought it'd be a good way to start for the second hour here. So floor is yours, man.
Sorry, I breathed my drink. I was over here choking. That reminds me of a story that I think I was on Ancient Aliens, where the guy was telling one of the writers there that does the show, but he was telling him that the ancient Neolithic people would put their seeds under these weird stone pedestals of like this granite, really hard quartzite rocks, and put their seeds in there. And they believe that something would electrify, or there would be some kind of field change on the seeds. And when you said that thing about six-eared corns, I vaguely remember it. So I was like having a memory lapse, but I was trying to look for it because it sounded so familiar. That makes you wonder, like, if you could find stuff like that, wouldn't that tie directly into like what's his name, Felix, Robert Felix, right? This idea of this spontaneous changing of all kinds of different species, and usually when I think of him, I think of more animals, but if the same processes that can change and basically make species go extinct and other species come about, rapid speciation due to cosmic ray influx, wouldn't that be the same, obviously, true for plants? And I was really thinking, to tie this back into the last hour, if you listen to the elites' plans about what they want to do and how they want to save the planet from man-made climate change and CO2 production, you realize what they're talking about basically is a world that is extinct from life. So they want to cut the CO2 down to the most dramatic levels. Basically, it's been right for animal life, or for smart, complex animal life. They want to get rid of that whole environment from the planet for some reason. Now, we've theorized terraforming for one reason or another, or it could be simply because they know that the Earth can rapidly change and rebound, because there's evidence of that. Obviously, after mass extinctions, there's massive speciation at those times too. Limited resources, only certain kinds of critters are left over that made it. But this idea of cosmic ray speciation would happen to the entire planet basically at the same time. And if you're thinking about, and I've been thinking about this a lot, the idea that the Earth's magnetic field, is kind of collapsing right now. And then if we have more I don't know how to put that, interchange of energies kind of from the sun and the other planets with this reduced magnetic field, I think it's very possible that when a CME or something like this, a very strong one, comes in, you might actually get to see what would be viewed as lightning coming out of the ground or coming out of these Neolithic structures that were created. Because I think maybe they witnessed a phenomenon like that in the ancient past. And this would have, think about it. It would look like magic to see lightning basically bolting out of surfaces on the Earth. And it might have been even dangerous to stand in certain places. Even that idea, since we went a little woo-woo, even that idea puts the whole concept of a once lost people that discovered the sciences of piezo electricity and I don't know what piezo technology, I guess. In other words, just they were able to manipulate, move, and create energies and ideas using just rock. And somehow they did this with no written language, which further puts it into the woo-woo that maybe at this time, when the magnetic field is different on the Earth, that it's very possible that people's brains realize that their sensory perception is expanded to a point where they could communicate ideas without speaking. And what we see in the Earth now, and if you link it back to some biblical stories and Sumerian stories, we all kind of spoke the same language at one point. And then we were separated and moved around into where we developed into different languages, kind of fits into that idea. But fast forward to the elite of now, they're trying to create a world with no greenery. And you think about those articles that talk about human beings, cells, literally aging considerably slower because they're in an environment that's stress-free with lots of greenery. And then you can go into, the sciences of people that eat high protein and no sugar diets. Like, a lot of the people that live a lot of time around the world have fish diets, and they attribute that to omega-3s and all of that stuff. However, it seems like the simplest diet and non-overeating and continuation of food, in other words, where there's food their whole life, not a lot, but enough to get by, enough where they don't build up these stress hormones in the past, that's the world that they're trying to get rid of. So literally the Garden of Eden concept, where there's two people living in a bliss, where there's plants, animals that provide them with nourishment, to this corporate technocratic system where, knock down a forest and put up a parking lot idea of transhumanism. And then you have people like, let's say his name, Bill Gates. He's talking crazy ideas about chopping forests down to stop, CO2, which doesn't even make sense because we all know that the trees breathe the CO2. And there's even a correlation amongst higher CO2 levels and lifespan or life expectancy. So they know the formula to reduce us back down to some kind of, I'm going to say, animal that does not have a long lifespan and has been mentally neutered and chemically castrated mentally and intellectually to the point that we can't use the natural progression to our advantage like they may have done in the ancient past. It seems like they are building a system that counteracts any part of the human domain as far as it was meant to be. So the whole natural world, they're trying to replace it with fake foods, fake plants, fake animals, chimeras, and they want to be the designers of the next phase of human evolution, if you want to use that word.
And cutting down a forest and putting 2,000 acres of solar panels in there, like we're just resurfacing the planet. Well, is the Borg episode from Star Trek really where we're going to go to, or the Death Star was the Earth and it's been covered in solar panels and all life removed? Because winding back to a couple points you were talking about, so the lexicon is very important when you're translating more ancient languages into more modern languages. Because, the Tower of Babel story said everybody spoke the same language. Well, see, that one word right there, language, that's the thing that throws everybody's thoughts off of they were speaking words. But perhaps the word language has been mistranslated, and perhaps it was communication or thoughts, something like this. But the word language got pushed in there because we all had the same thoughts. Is very different than we all spoke the same language. We all thought and communicated the same thoughts. And that's very different than language. And going back to possibly where ley lines on the earth would glow with the minerals, and the resonant frequency would allow light to emit as the spectrum coming off of the rocks, the piezoelectric. Now you got to think about how many combinations of quartzites, sandstones, pure mineral veins there are on the planet. I mean, you got everything from aluminum, you got everything from the steel, the oxides, everything that you can possibly think of that's a raw, refined metal that you could find in your house or in your car or on a ship or on an airplane has all been mined from the earth at very small quantities per ton and then refined into that one base metal. So think about the connectivity and the colors that would come from that. Well, the reason I'll bring you back to that is John Burke and Kaj Halberg, they were trying to go with the same thing. Instead of using the electrified plates to generate seed and get it to come out to different species or different yields, what they would do is go to megalithic structures. And they went to like 160 different ancient structures on the planet, and with magnetometers measured at the peaks of these. And the most famous one that they started way back in 1998, and they went to El Mundo Perdido in Tikal. And the reason they chose that specific pyramid was it was the oldest and the first one built in Tikal. So they started to find a formula with this, where what you consider the tops of those Mayan pyramids that aren't flat, that still had the vertical facing stones on them at the top, were used to harness the ether, just like we talk about Tartaria and the different antennae that are on some of the more ancient buildings that were wiped out and destroyed in World War II. So, Nikola Tesla talks about harvesting the ether. Well, if these pyramids were on ley lines and the Paleozoic rock, whatever mineral composition was used to direct that, and they put their harvests on top of these temples, and these are exactly what they showed, because the significantly faster sprouting, uniform growth, higher yields than the control samples, just by putting them on a megalithic or ancient site that they could peg down to being the first at a site. And the reason that was the first structure on the site, it was the most revered, to mark the site as having special energies associated with it magnetically and electrically. So you got to think about, they wrote a whole book on this thing called Seed of Knowledge, Stone of Plenty. There's an actual book on their 160 visits to the megaliths, the megalith builders, and understanding these technologies using resonant frequency to charge the seeds to get higher yields. And for some reason, this information is not really being talked about amongst agricultural circles too much, just like electroculture is not either. And you have to wonder why. Improved yields, less inputs, no chemical industry required. Again, you come back to that non-humanist thing, like you start spreading millions of tons of chemicals everywhere, that's not good for the human domain. But growing things in harmony and symbiosis without using the chemical inputs, that brings us back into why those people live to be 103 years old. I know there's a lot of hidden mysteries that I think are about to be re-revealed with the weakening magnetic field and the energies that shall return to some of these sites. I think we're going to see a lot of things that are going to make people question what we've been sold as truth moving forward.
I wonder how long it'll be, though. We joke around on this channel. I don't know if it's more of a joke. It's more like a prediction that there's a very real possibility that soon, if not already, there's been a singularity where human beings at the top have given over the reins of the direction of what we're doing to an AI. An AI that's biased, an AI that they programmed or they had programmed. And here's this article kind of talking about the same thing. Due to AI, we are about to enter an era of mass spying. Now, I did not read this article, but obviously, right off the bat, there's a fallacy going on that most people probably wouldn't recognize when they started reading the article. And that is that the fact that the era of mass spying has been here since, I'm going to say, at least the mid-90s. At the time, you could get a cell phone. And, although if someone stole your cell phone, you might lose a lot of money because they wouldn't do much about it to find out where it was or turn it off. They would just bill you. In the future, we, have a different thing now. They'll turn off the phone within minutes. It can be tracked. They'll get law enforcement involved because, well, we have created a mass spying era. And we don't even know it. And that's kind of what I was talking about before, that if someone was going to sell us this idea, we wouldn't buy it. But they reworded it in a way in which people thought they needed it. Now, even only a few years ago, if, you ask someone, is it okay if I read your emails? You just went up to a random stranger and you said, can I look at your phone? I would like to look at your pictures. I would like to read your correspondence with your loved ones. And of course, they're going to tell you to F off because you're a weirdo. But after the age of Edward Snowden and WikiLeaks and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, we now know that there has been and still is massive surveillance of American citizens in particular. And the directive seemingly from the top of that spy agency, i.e. the United States government, that seems to want to look at and rifle through the ideas, thoughts, possessions, and disrespect the rights of its own citizens, has been running this, and people are still getting used to the idea that it's a reality. But it's been a reality, and they outed it to the public in a way like a disclosure, and no one did anything. No one got in trouble. No one went to jail. No one stopped doing it because this was the inevitable outcome of the technology that we've been using. So the phone, the track and trace system, everything from our food to the information we gather is now controlled from a source of AI that decides who, when, where, how, and what people absorb as far as ideas, but also products and human rights. So we're now in an era where even the human right is metered and measured and crippled in a way where it's more like a product given. And that's why a lot of times you hear the government refer to rights as privileges, because they are pointing out that they are the masters of those so-called rights. And, we're increasing into a more Marxist, transhuman, technocratic, I'm going to say atheist type government in which they have made themselves in their idea in God's image. In other words, they have put themselves in that position, and they've created a world where the AI is looked at in a more religious aspect as maybe a source for spirituality for these technocrats. And they are willing to put the whole world in that control. And I argue that they already have done that. So it makes you wonder, when is this pyramid of ideas going to decide for the planet that human beings, because of its programmed bias and the people who have programmed it and created it and now worship it and want to be part of it, have created a world where this AI will run a script, and that script involves human beings being the bad part of the outcome of the planet. So they are going to use this system to systematically destroy humanity. And I don't put that in like an anecdotal way, like, systematically. I literally mean that. Like, all aspects of the human domain have been and are now controlled by some form of artificial intelligence, programmed with people that have biases and allegiance to elites who constantly talk about population reduction and that they're doing it. So now they're doing it right in front of us, but they have the masses programmed into this AI into a way that it's completely distracted constantly. I remember that when I was a kid, once in a while, my dad would mess up or have an alcoholic episode or whatever, and we wouldn't have lights or heat or, a TV or nothing. It would all slowly just disappear into famine, basically. We really appreciated the antenna television influence of media at the time. And it seemed like an unbearable existence to not have electricity. And lots of old people at the time would tell us, hey, stop crying. When I was a kid, we didn't really have electricity either. We pooped outside in an outhouse. We had to grow our food. We didn't even have candy and soda pop and all that junk. And they told us, and they made fun of us, and they laughed at us for, our crying and whining about the uncomfortableness of not having electricity. And now we live in an era where people expect, like these millennials that expect $500,000 a year to live and be happy. They expect heat, air, electricity, but also internet. And if you've ever seen a person lose the internet or their phone connection or their phone, you'll see that there's an unreal kind of withdrawal and panic and an episode that will occur shortly after that, when that human being realizes that connection is gone. And it shows you that the psychology of the basic human now thinks that is an integral part of their self, their identity, who they are, and even the way they think. They can't think, they can't look up things, they can't verify things, they can't view their opinion. And in this way, the AI has already captured any part of the Western world's mentality. Meanwhile, we can go back to the real things that are happening for the people that don't really care or haven't been indoctrinated as much. They're being shipped in as a replacement for the vegetables that will no longer even defend themselves. And we can get into that, but you look across the Western world and what you see are governments prosecuting people for defending their selves, their lives, their property.
Yeah, it does take on a new twist when you can't protect your own family in your own home. It gets a little bit, well, something's definitely pushing that stand down type of mentality. But I was reading through a couple of the comments here, and was one of them was talking about a fig clone. Pretty cool. You can just cut a branch off, stick it in the dirt, and it will root. I would also add to that, if you have willow bark or willow leaves and you leave them in water for 24 to 48 hours, after you plant that, there's a natural rooting hormone inside willow bark and willow leaves that will help your clones take off without having to use rooting hormone, the white powder that you would buy from somewhere. So that's a real trick all the old timers use. And also, before they would plant the fig clone, they would leave it sit in that water for about 12 hours or so to really let it permeate into the bark. And then after they replanted the fig, they would actually water the area that they replanted the fig with that with the willow bark water with the hormone in it. And you hit on the AI there, and I am becoming more convinced that we're also living in a simulation. So what do simulations do? They run and they reset. They run and they reset. It's a simulation. Once something plays out to an expected X percentage in the program, then it resets. So what if this program is really millions of years old, and then, as we come through, the reset is nothing more than a simulation reset? Because you got the Neanderthal, okay, it was a reset, and then the Homo sapiens came. Because if you look at this in the way that the spiritual mind would take a look at creation, the reason that you're born, the reason that you're here, is to create something so God, the creator itself, can experience a creation of something new and different through you of itself. Forget that whole thing about you're here for these spiritual lessons, whatever. You're here for creation to create. Now, if you're looking at an AI program running, what if there's a million-year-old AI program that's been here and we truly are in a hologram, as so many people say? Then it would be a simulation that would reset. Now, the simulation in itself, once it had enough novelty of a certain species doing a bunch of, let's say we started with a pristine planet, Adam and Eve story would come out. There's two people, if you want to follow the classical myth, in the garden. And from that point, everything is novelty on the planet after the simulation resets back to there's two people on the planet. Everything's new species, new whatever is on the planet, from animals to plants. And everything is novelty. And this is the biggest thing, novelty in the simulation of newness of creation, until you reach that point where there can be nothing new created anymore, because it's all then just repetition of the previous creation. Like literally, there's nothing new under the sun at some point in the simulation. It's just regurgitation and recombinations of the same that's been created before or invented before. It really comes to there is nothing new. At that point, would it not make sense for the simulation to say, all right, we've run every possible permutation. We know it's going to come back to the same outcome. It's time to start over. And it resets itself. Now, what does a reset entail for us? The deletion of our species. Because I tell you what, you talk about Neanderthal and Denisovans, it's the same thing. It's just the end of the simulation, and that species is done because their novelty has come to the point as far as it can go. And this whole simulation and the simulated reality thing, how many times would it have to run? 1,000 times? How do you know you can escape this reality? Why are some people better at manifesting reality or bending the physicalness around? And I was trying to wind it back into your, $500,000 a year thing. Like, what is it? Who's able to bend reality that it can understand this hologram matrix that can bend it and make billions of dollars? Because if you were looking at even, let's say, okay, in the manifestation, Think and Grow Rich, if you're looking at Napoleon Hill's book, you have to manifest that. It's in your mind. You're already, the production of your, I wouldn't even say illusion, but your thought of you manifesting that goal and feeling the emotions and the thankfulness for actually clutching that goal and actually experiencing it as you have it right now before it's even manifested, like that gratefulness and happiness and pleasure or whatever it is, to experience those emotions now as if you already had that goal in your hand and you're experiencing that goal or dream or whatever it is. So even if you're at that point of, thinking in the present, I make $30,000 a month. Okay, hold that for a second. That's $1,000 a day. That's $365,000 per year. And somehow somebody over in the millennials is like, oh, that's not good enough. $1,000 a day is not good enough to live. I need $535,000. Something's completely out of kilter there. But how are these people able to bend to create that amount of money by moving within the matrix and creating those feelings of having it now to make that manifest in reality by focusing on those vision boards, by focusing those energies, the mantras, the things that you would say to yourself to get into that space of already owning that dream that you've created for yourself? Is that part of the simulation too? And when not enough people continue to use that gift given, because as you're coming back right now, everything we're doing now is to dehumanize us, to make you feel as if there's no more hope, is to make you feel as if you're trapped in this reality. Well, are you trapped in the matrix? Does it come down to the very last manifester? They called it the last airbender. Well, maybe it's the last manifester. And once there's no new novelty in the system resets itself. That's why we all need to have these goals and understand that just what you're seeing, this matrix given around you, as much as that Think and Grow Rich book by Napoleon Hill, take those emotions and instead of it in a goal of manifesting a physical thing, what if you use that same manifestation of, I'm not in your simulated reality of this global war thing anymore. I'm not in this simulated reality of an economic reset where everybody is going into a hyperinflationary Great Depression. I no longer exist in that world. That is a world of the past, and I have rifted in the singularity, and I split off to this era where that never existed in my timeline. That's the way, if millions and billions of people manifest mind, then there's still novelty. And the simulation program continues, and it does not delete this Homo sapien iteration of it. Because if you go back into the Indian texts, and there's so many of the Bhagavad Gita and the Vedic texts, and there's just so many different books describing eras of time and how to use technologies and how to use energies. I mean, there's it's an endless array of bending the hologram, basically. But they say it goes back 23 million years. So perhaps this holographic universe layer that we're in, what if it is 23 million years old? Because we look back at the fossil records, like we talked about one show, and we started at 8 million years ago. So what happens if every time you see an extinction event of a hominid species, it's run to the end of its novelty course, and then the simulation has run and then resets? Because how many times do we just look back and it makes no sense? They were at the highest apex order of their civilization or their species, and then boom, they just disappeared. Again and again and again. That's the normal. That's the normal. It just ceases and it starts over again. So what is it about the simulation reset? See, that's where I'm kind of stuck, but I really believe there's a way out of this thing here. Now, is that too woo-woo to try to wrap a few points there together, Ransom?
No, and you know, I think that's one of the spookiest things out there in the theories of the universe and all of that, is that no matter what we do or where we look, we find mathematical patterns, you know, that are inexplicable, and we kind of call them laws of nature. But the only thing that we've ever come across in our existence in mankind here, that I know of, or that at least the public knows about, is binary code, and then later, you know, more complex codes that eventually led to what we're tinkering with today, which is artificial intelligence and simulations, programs, and other things that are built with mathematics. It's a way for us to look into a window of a universe that we've created or mocked, copied. So the idea that when we look out into what we perceive as the actual universe that we're living in, and then we start finding the same, you know, sort of seams and connections there with mathematics, that it seems that it's very possible we are a simulation, or that the entire idea of us. It's ironic because I just uploaded this. I'm sure you've seen it. It's been going around for about 5 or 6 years, at least the other parts. It's like a fake computer-generated alien interview. But they throw some complex ideas out there, like the one that, you know, every person or life form that you come across is actually the same consciousness expressed in a certain way. So I'm you, you're me, everybody experiences it all because there's only one consciousness, and that we are mistaken in the idea of death, because death isn't exactly a real thing. It's more like the in-between of the consciousness, the separation of the consciousness. That's what we explain as death. You know, so it's pretty weird that some guy just put out a hoax video and let it run on the internet for a while and then took credit for it. And, you know, they took credit for it because they're boosting their animation skills and stuff. But it's ironic that they put a lot of detail in there, at least about this philosophy of the universe just being random or versus being created. But in my opinion, they left out this part of the simulation of the universe, because all aspects of the universe seem to fall under some sort of physical laws. Now, we may not agree on humans' theories of these physical laws and how they work. Like, you know, some people believe gravity has an attraction, but more like Einstein described it, is that it's actually just objects going with inertia that continue down their path. And because objects with a large amount of mass bend time-space, then the object curves along that bend in the time-space and continues on really what would be a straight line, other than being it's not really falling, but going with the contour of the curve of the gravity. So some people believe that. But then when you get into the electric universe theory, it would be easy to understand that in a simulation, it's just a bunch of numbers and formulas that need to be balanced out. And that's exactly what we see in the universe. Everywhere from chemistry to electromagnetic forces, it always is a balance. It's a balancing out. And we get to see the physicalness of the universe, so to speak, or the reality of it, actually, when you get to see things like lightning, when you get to see chemical changes. I mean, think about an idea of something burning. Oxygen, you know, in the air, you got plenty of oxygen, you light something on fire. It's hard to understand that that's a chemical reaction happening, and that matter is just transforming into another form of matter there. But you can clearly see that something that was once a solid is now a gas, a wisp of smoke, and is totally different. And the same things for the entire universe. We keep finding this complex mathematics system. Like, for example, the periodic table. We can, theorize and have ideas about places that have yet to be discovered of materials that are on the periodic table, because we know the mathematics. We have caught on to the pattern. The simulation is basically that same thing. So, that's why, in my opinion, that there has to be some sort of creator of the universe, and otherwise there wouldn't be the proofs of the simulation of this idea that we're living in, this simulation of this consciousness we call the universe.
Yeah, how powerful is it to take yourself below the atomic level to the subatomic level into the quantum universe and exist there in your mind? How powerful would it be to grab hands full of qubits and infuse your energy into them to then scale through the atomic and then the molecular level to turn into the physical manifestation of your thought? Take yourself into that subatomic level in its own vastness that it would be, but it is a pure vibrating energy level, whatever color you deem it to be, vibrating gold crystals or whatever you perceive that reverberating base energy layer to be, and interact with that to then bring it through to create atoms that then form higher chained physical manifestations. Because here's the one thing that blew my mind is, the reason things vibrate and energy moves is there's heat associated with it. So if you bring something down to 0 Kelvin, that's absolute zero. There should be zero movement because you're at the lowest possible temperature that physical matter can be brought down to. Nothing should move at that point because there's zero heat in it. But they always find there's still vibration moving. So it's something below that level of even the atomic structure, of a built-in layer of vibration and frequency that exists outside what you consider literal laws of physics, universe, geometry, magnetism, gravity, well outside that. That's something that should not be able to move in vibration. No matter how slight the vibration, there should be zero. But everything that they've ever experimented with on, it all still vibrates at 0 Kelvin. So there's something below that. And that's to try to get out of this matrix that we live in, because I believe far more than 90% of it's psyop. It's all to get you believe that it's already in play or it's already manifested, ED on the planet. All these plans from the elite and all these ideas for the future, they're not here yet, not at all. There's a very good chance that just your thoughts and ideas resonating in the frequency field can actually stop that, push it back, make it not even take place. Because once people start to stand up physically and become very brave about what they will or will not accept, those plans just kind of go out into the ether, never to be heard from again. Like, just think about your life and how many times have they tried to push things through and then enough people stood up and then it stopped and it's never going back. They've never tried it again. I think it's one of those things where manifest tries to manifest. They're very good, these elite, at manifesting. They teach their children it. They have their mantras. They have their hours of thought in unison together. You might call that ceremony, but one person can manifest something, but imagine 100 or the Council of 300 or some of these organizations where it's very structured. And they're all warlocks and witches and so able to bend energies and use them, but usually in a very dark way. But the amount of vast wealth and riches on this planet concentrated into a very small amount of hands means that they have unlocked that code into being able to generate something physical from that base energy layer that works in their favor to continually grow in their power. Now tap into that, use that same power, but in terms of good. And then we come right back to this light and dark battle. I don't know, it did a whole 360 on that thing. Can everybody think and grow rich? And again, the grow rich is the part. It's the illusion part of the grow rich. Yeah, once you have enough physical money and physical goods and physical possessions to make sure that you don't freeze in winter, you're protected and you're safe, that nobody's going to come in the middle of your house and rob you or steal your organs. Okay, once you reach that point of pretty much safety, food, shelter, once you have all those basics met and you're very comfortable, those words, again, that lexicon, grow rich, could be the misinterpretation of the Tower of Babel when we all spoke the same language, but really it was we all had the same communication. We all had the same communication of thought, but the misinterpretation of that single word substituted the word language, but now we're tricked into believing it was words that were all spoken the same, when it was, like I say, telepathy would be communication and thought. So think and grow rich. The word rich has been misinterpreted to always be gold, silver, money, wealth. And I ended up watching this documentary on the world's most expensive home. And it's actually a castle in France. And I was looking at their gardens, and they have these massive greenhouses there, just the most astonishing greenhouses, and mind-blowing. But looking down the courtyard, this thing is some, 1,500 feet long, and you're looking straight down this garden, and everything is square-shaped bushes and square-shaped trees, and they have bent nature out of its original organic form of smooth shapes into all squares and rectangles. And in the documentary, it talks about that is how the powerful and the wealthy showed how they could dominate with their wealth and power to take nature and bend it at their will into something that is not natural. So when you were to walk at this courtyard, let's say in the 1700s, and all these bushes were square, your jaw would drop and go, oh, how much power and wealth does this person have? How many people are they using to bend nature and form it into a rectangle or a square of a bush? This was a representation of wealth, and rich was the ability to control nature at that level. It wasn't about how much gold they had or how big their palace was. It was about the ability to show nobility and power and wealth through control over and dominion over nature. And again, we get into this misinterpretations. I mean, how much of the Sumerian texts have been misinterpreted with the incorrect lexicon that we still take today? Like the Aramaic, the original, language used to write the Bible with. You take Aramaic all the way to English, it's gone through Roman, it's gone through Greek, it's gone through, how many translations before it's gotten to today? You really think it's the same word? Because I was at my parents, and I'll give you an example. I was at my parents' house, and they had a few Bibles laying around there, and they go to church quite often. So I was asking about the Anunnaki, and I was like, well, yeah, look up Genesis, Anunnaki. And it said the word giants in there. And I was like, why does it say the word giants? Anunnaki are very, very, they're very referenced. So why is the word giant now instead of the actual term of the name that was a referenced name of Elohim and these types of Anunnaki? Why did the biblical scriptures change and move all those words over from the actual reference thing to just giants? There were giants in the day. There were Nephilim in the day. Okay, they even misconstrued and moved the word from Nephilim into giants. So think about what's in the Aramaic, how many times something's been translated into a different word that now is a completely different word, but how we interpret that has locked us into this thought concept. Like they've trapped us with a lexicon, whether it be giants or whether it be rich or whether it be language. You can, like 3 examples right there on how our world and reality is bent just by the single word. But my mind was blown open how kings and queens presented their wealth by showing dominion over nature to make square shapes out of plants that was impressive and incredible for me. I'd never heard that before. So I'll leave it there, Ransom. Maybe you can comment, but I don't know, man. I keep my world's view is starting to bend a little bit on what I thought reality was before.
Well, you were kind of on the same track. That's kind of where I was going with the whole idea of them hijacking us out of our natural human environment. And I know that you're familiar with the 300 monkeys or 100 monkeys phenomenon or whatever, about the idea that monkeys that are segregated can learn a trick in one group, and then the other one spontaneously learns that same, talent or idea. So if you put that into perspective with human beings, then it would be in the interest of the global elite to distract and hijack any kind of energies or message that you might have from nature or meditation or thought or spirituality, love or gardening or cultivating, all of these positive things, and instead replace them with immoral and negative news, negative things, war, strife, famine, etc. And then you get into this idea that you were talking about, that, they have their own little groups of people and their weird philosophies and esoteric groups that get around and try to manifest things through different, ideas of meditating, sacrificing, all kinds of other things, sigils, ideas like that. But what that does, when you realize that these are the type of people that are in control of the AI and the media and the social engineering programs that are working their way through society, then you realize that what they're doing actually is blocking the rest of humanity from doing the same thing, meaning that they're blocking them from this, 100 monkey phenomenon, but, kind of jokingly, but 100 humans or 1,000 humans or 1 million humans or 1 billion or 8 billion humans realizing an idea obviously would manifest and outpower any kind of sway or power that they had in this type of energy of manifesting things. And that's what they've done. They've tricked us as the people to manifesting these dark things. And they do that by controlling every aspect of our lives, except for the people that break through. And those people, kind of group together as well. And we've talked about this before, about it might be time for human beings to start their own secret societies, first in their families, and then, groups of people that they trust and communities, and start passing on the ideas. The modern seed saver, concentrating on seed, because that actually is the only form, including, life that we see procreate, is the only actual form of magic or manifestation that you could show someone in real time, that positive things, cultivating, and all of these energies put into something, a seed of any kind. You can use it as an animal embryo or a seed off of a plant. But if you put time, energy, thought, and manifestation into that, it will be a tree. It will be a flower. It will be a human being. It will be. And what you're doing basically when you do that is time travel. And I don't think a lot of people understand this concept. So when you're talking about whether or not it's okay to stop something from growing per se, what you're really doing is traveling to the future and eliminating that future and making sure that future never manifests. So whether we're talking about a single life or a single seed or the outcome of the human civilization, there are forces out there trying to manifest, steer, and control the destiny of the eventual output of these ideas. So that's why each human kind of has to have this epiphany on their self, that they control their thoughts, not the elite, and they control their manifestation. And in that way, we can control the future. It's a time travel. I put a seed in the ground. I know in the future, with enough time and care and love, this plant or animal is going to provide me with life in a circle that cannot be broken if we intend on living out and continuing on the path that we were supposed to do in the program or simulation. However, others have also discovered this, and that's why they use their nefarious tools and assets to sway the course of this evolution of mankind. And they use these tricks. And some of them aren't tricks. They're just basic psychology of human beings, prone to fear. And they use the idea of our existence, our instincts against us. Human beings are basically built to deal with saber-toothed tiger right in front of them, the bear that's snarling at you, the group, fight or flight. And that's when we figure it out. And they know this, and they know that human beings will put off and have a hard time thinking about future problems and future plans and future manifestations. So they, do stuff like, I'm going to go ahead and say it, they infiltrate the water, the food, the education, the air even. And now we're in the future where they're even trying to play God with the environment, cutting down stuff out of spite of nature is what it seems like. Not for nature or, for humans, but why would you want to even go into a program like that of death and destruction?
You wouldn't. And those who try to direct others away, if they have a large enough following, I'll bring you back to the Beatles again. Love, love, love. If you can't get people to hate each other, you can't have a war now, can you? Thanks for staying with us. David DuByne right here along with Ransom Godwin signing off. We'll see you next week. Revolution Radio, Studio A, 10 p.m. to midnight every Thursday. What can you manifest this week that's positive for the world?